Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 28 for 28 podcast series. The 28 for 28 podcast, as you may be aware, is dedicated to inspiring and empowering young individuals, and our mission is to amplify their voices and stories. Through this platform, we aim to provide a space where their work can be recognized and celebrated. And today, we are joined with one such changemaker, Achintya, and the podcast will be hosted by Sneha. So, over to both of you.
Thank you, Nandini. And again, thank you, Mash, for the opportunity to let me host a podcast with you guys. So, without any further ado, we have Achintya with us today. Achintya believes the idea for the inception of Youth Action Leadership Forum for Environment can be attributed to his passion for being a young advocate for environmental concerns. Realizing that the significant disparity between discussion and statement has made these forums bring actual implementation for effective measures on ground. And the idea of this youth driven action and leadership forum was born underscoring the urgent need for dedicated platforms that would then facilitate serious youth led deliberations, foster meaningful connections, and then provide forums that are impactful for creating dialogue and in the environmental domain. So thank you, Achintya, for doing this, and it's lovely to have you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Aditya, we'll start by you telling us something about how has been your journey in the environmental field.
Honestly speaking, I'm quite new to this field. I haven't been a very old player in this field. It was more like just a couple of months back that I started. I mean, last November only. Uh, Prior to that, I was more on the research on the policy side, doing like the academic part of it, like more on the lab and doing experiments and stuff on the more scientific aspect of it. But later on, I kind of through offline interaction and participation in different seminars and workshops and stuff, which led to kind of the understanding that there's this huge disparity that people say that youth is required to be a part of these forums and youth has to be heard, but unfortunately it was all just the statements that were given out by the ministers or uh, stalwarts in the industry, but there was this disconnect that I felt that youth were not actually getting involved in this space and they did not have like a I mean we
Yeah.
youth as a stakeholder did not have like a seat on the table. So that's where I felt, there has to be some action that needs to be taken, and those statements have to be connected, and the bridges to be made, so that youth's voice can be heard at all the different meetings that take place or the negotiations, deliberations. Like a generational problem anymore. It's more like an everyone problem. So everyone's voices need to be heard and everyone's perspectives need to be heard. And more so, the youth comes in with like a new perspective and new ideas and thought processes. So it's much more important that the youth it's getting represented in these forums or discussions. So that's how Irada kind of came in, but like it was more on it was like a long journey. I mean, I started like last November on attending one of these seminars by the Council of Energy, Environment, Water. Eventually, I took part in other, such forums, discussions, seminars, and it was like over a period of time that I observed that there was this disconnect that was continuously being present throughout all these seminars. Although they were happening, like events happening dedicatedly for the youth, but unfortunately there was no impact assessment of those events as to whether the youth voices are actually getting heard or not, or what they've taken into account by the actual ministers and stuff. So that is where Irada comes in and it brings in like the connect. So all the youth activists, policymakers and change makers who wants to kind of dwell in this field of climate and environment in general can always take part. And it's more of like through the three pillars that we're focusing on. The first is like awareness and education of environmental aspects. The second is like the action, and the third is the advocacy part. So yeah, I mean that's how Irada came in, and the it's a platform, like it's a safe space wherein youth can come in and take part and do their part, individual part, if not like the community level. at this through this forum, and it's more of like capacity building and all these pillars mixed together to kind of bring about change.
Mm. And definitely, like youth voices, even now that some of us do have a seat at the table, it's important that the voices get translated into policies, right? And
Yeah,
not just be taken into consideration and then tossed out the window. So there are going to be such obstacles. Being young people in the field, it is always the case that you get taken off as maybe you're too young, maybe you don't know enough. And you did attend the LCOI recently. So
yeah, yeah.
what do you think have been the challenges and what were your learnings from LCOI?
I mean, Alcoy was definitely an eye opener because we had so much of uh, diversity in the a whole group that we had. Like people were coming from extreme south, extreme north, the east, the west, and every like delegate had his or her own kind of background in the sense like that Gujarat and the neighboring states might be facing a different environmental issue. There were diverse topics that were being talked about, but at the same time, we faced that everybody had something to put out, and like we had people from UNICEF, we had people from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and they did so. Yeah, I mean, definitely we are trying to take that step, but it's still the point that you mentioned. We are always taken at the we are given the least priority in the order of like policy implementation when getting our voices actually being taken into account, not just like acknowledging it, but actually implementing it in their policies. But yeah, that's still a focus area that we need to still work on, and make the like government and the policymakers understand that it has to be incorporated in their policies. Otherwise, again, it's translating back to that. It's not a generational problem; it's an everyone problem. So, youth voices need to be heard, and it's a place where it's very tricky that we need to actually kind of make them and persuade them to understand our recommendations and our policies that we can.
So when we do talk about such negotiations, there are world leaders and decision makers who need to take into account all the discourses that are going on in different parts of the world and in their local communities. So, what would be your message for these world leaders?
Probably the biggest message I can think of right now is like climate change is the biggest national and global issue, and probably the sub and still the world leaders think no, there's other better and important things that their uh, presence is required. And I think it's an absolute myth. Climate change and the environmental degradation and the issues and the threats that we are facing. I mean, climate change is no more like a change. It's more of like a emergency and a crisis that's happening right now, and that's why it's like the biggest global issue that should be talked about, and it should be given that kind of importance. But across the globe, we are still yet to kind of come across that kind of importance. I mean, that kind of importance. Only a handful of countries are actually on their 2030 goals or NDCs probably, and most of the countries have failed with their NDCs and all those goals that they have kind of openly talked about and bragged about. And it's high time that these leaders actually focus on it. And with the COP28, I'm looking forward to have like some important and some meaningful deliberations and some meaningful commitments towards the environment and climate change issues. So yeah, that's
So
I
then,
mean, we have to be hopeful and a bit. I mean, we youth should actually kind of manifest that things happen in the favor of the environment and the climate. But I mean, we youth have, as I said, have like a very little space and a very little, kind of say in the tables. Even if you consider UNFCCC, the youth have like the least amount of priority, and they are given the least amount of time to speak. So that clearly says what's their commitment and what's their agendas looking at, and
Yeah.
that's all I can say. It's
So,
quite ironical at the same time, but we our hands are tied up. We can't. I
yeah.
mean, we do as much as we can, but still, there's a limit to what we do.
Yeah, so gradually things are changing. Now we are in the side sessions and not, it's not in the main hall. So there are many young people out there who are still, trying to understand how to get into this space, be it climate change, environment science, ecology, conservation, things like that. So what inspires you and what would be your message in a sentence for these young people out there?
So I would start like saying that people nowadays do understand what's climate change or like what's global warming. Everybody is aware with that. I mean, if you ask even like a third, fourth grader, if he's able to communicate with you, maybe you can ask like Jalvayu Parivartan. Everyone you can say it's happening because climate is changing. The rising temperatures, unwanted rains at unwanted times, and uh, with now Delhi is facing almost unprecedented rates of earthquakes. I mean, almost every other month we are having earthquakes. So everybody knows that climate change is for real, or at least something bad or something worse is happening. I mean, it's about to come. But what people don't know is like what's the immediate step of action to take? Like what's the contribution they could make in helping the environment, heal itself. So I guess Irada somewhere is actually doing that part. I mean, it's focusing on that pillar, like the action pillar, because as we said, we are quite I mean, we are doing well with the awareness and education part. We are trying to incorporate environmental education with, UGC's FIUP, before your undergraduate program has the mandates that, student has to study those environmental courses at some point in time. But our application part has to be taken care of, and youth needs to understand, what's the action that they could take at their individual level, and onwards and upwards, what their community can do, how they can engage their communities, families, or local areas for that matter. And the sentence that I would say, like the quote stuff, I would say it's like it's nobody's environment, it's always yours. It's and we have borrowed it from our ancestors. I mean, and we have to give it to our predecessors. Or I mean, the predecessors and successors concept कि हम किसे लिया है, and it's not we have inherited it from our like, wait, how do I say it? Like, it's more of like, it's not for you as a property, it's for everyone, and you should take care of it. You should not meet your like greeds to it. It's only for your needs and not your greeds. Just use it consciously and respectfully the nature, and I guess it will help you grow and pay you back at times. So yeah, I mean, treat it with respect, and help it grow yourself. So yeah, but again, not in that sense ki, like, don't harm it and go into the greedy part. I want to make a lot of money, and that's why I'm harnessing the environment at an unprecedented rate. So that shouldn't be the case. It should be how you should always be in sync and be in like coexist with the nature, and I guess you should be fine with that.
True. So yeah, indeed, the resources we have right now are the true generational wealth, that
Mhm.
has been passed on to us, and it's our responsibility that we continue the tradition. So with that, we come to the end of our podcast, and thank you so much for telling us your journey, telling us your thoughts, and it has been amazing. And thank you for
Thank you so much.
everyone. Yeah, thank you.